Meanwhile, in Russia, things are getting more and more cheerful, even though, as it turns out, only the most notorious, gloomy Russophobes can claim that Russians have been completely deprived of their right to speak. No, they have not been deprived of their right to speak. It's just that the freedom of speech that once existed has been trimmed down a bit to the freedom of the letter. Because, as it turns out, the regime still allows citizens to gather once a year and shout whatever comes into their lungs or throat. That is, it turns out that in Russia, it is not forbidden to shout out any individual letters of the Russian or even say the Latin alphabet. There is, however, an ironclad rule that must be followed. Shouting out words or even, for example, syllables is not allowed. But mostly, there's a video on a Telegram channel. There are about 300 or 400 people on the Trinity Bridge in St. Petersburg. And for the most part, of course, they are shouting the banal letters A and I. Although it is considered permissible to shout, for example, even the letter E, which sounds impressive and much more dramatic than E. Well, and some brave souls, some daring guys, even go for the letter R and shout the letter R. But, of course, those people are immediately noticed by the FSB agents, who are thickly mixed into the shouting crowd. And the police and Orthodox activists keep a close eye on them, because shouting the letter OOP in this situation is a clear signal that these citizens need to be dealt with, since this is practically treason, punishable by up to 15 years. Well, Russians technically have the right to exercise their freedom of speech, but only very early in the morning, and far away from government buildings and institutions. And, this slave-like pleasure of shouting is quite enough for Russians. They disperse satisfied, feeling almost like Decembrists, rebels, and heroes. And against the backdrop of all this nightmare, against everything that's happening, we suddenly see an absolute hit on the internet. We see a young woman from the city of Shelekov, a woman named Maria, who, fully aware of all the consequences for herself, tells Russians that their medals received for the special military operation are a mark of shame or disgrace. She calls them murderers and calls the special military operation nonsense and villainy. That is to say, of course, in this courage and in the clear mind of an ordinary Russian woman, there is something absolutely extraordinary these days. She's not an opposition figure, not a writer, not a journalist, not a politician, not a deputy. So this young woman from a provincial town just went ahead and told the whole country what she really thinks and feels about the special military operation, about this senseless and criminal war of Putin's. It's clear that she's an ordinary person, and she must have been very afraid. But sometimes it happens that shame and pain break through that fear from within. And she managed to do it. And probably right now, the angel of history is already inscribing her name in gold alongside those who also overcame this slavish instinct, this Russian slavish instinct. But of course, they pounced on her. She's already in a psychiatric hospital where they will break her and possibly force some kind of apology out of her. That won't matter anymore. But you know what I think is the most curious thing about this whole story? What is the most surprising? If you were to get Skabieva thoroughly drunk or inject the patriot Buzova with thiopental, the so-called true serum, they would end up saying pretty much the same things as Maria. After all, everyone in Russia understands everything, because it's impossible not to see the vile things the Kremlin is doing. Everyone understands, but everyone lives in a state of fear.